Ranking every map in Marvel Rivals. This is obviously going to be a very subjective list. I'll be ranking them based off of three main categories. One, the most important, is going to be the map layout. A good map layout to me is a map that feels good to play throughout the entire map on any point, whether you're on offense or defense. I think if the layout of a map is good, a wide variety of heroes and team comps will be viable. A good map isn't going to favor the attackers too much or favor the defenders too much. It's going to feel like you have a fair shot at it no matter what hero you're on, no matter which side you're on. The second thing I'll be ranking them off of is the map gimmick, or the interactable maps. I'll be factoring in how the destructibility of the map feels, as well as, all the little gimmicks that come with it, whether that's you shoot the elevator goes up, or the smoke that appears on some maps that you just can't see anybody in. And then the third factor I'll be ranking these maps off of is just the vibe. This is a very subjective list. At the end of the day, if a map looks good, if it's a nice, bright, sunshiny map, I'm probably just going to favor it just because I like a map like that. Within the vibe, you also have like the lore elements to the map. Does the map like kind of tell a story of what's happening? And all three of these things together will make up my ranking. Gameplay is going to be me messing around in quick play, learning some magic, but this ranking is going to be mainly based off of the ranked experience, the mode that I play the most. Not quick play, not coordinated, we're talking rank play. There are 9 maps in Marvel Rivals. There are 3 domination maps in Marvel Rivals, aka the control point maps. There are 3 convoy maps, aka the payload, the maps where you walk right out of spawn and the payload's right there ready to push for you. And there are 3 convergence maps, the mode where first point is an objective and then the second 2 points are you pushing the payload the rest of the way. Anyway, starting at number 9, the worst map in Marvel Rivals, in my opinion, it's gonna be Hydra Charteris base Hell's Heaven. This is the map you think of when you think of a map that just has all the different moving parts. Personally, I'm not a hater of this map. I don't think there actually is a bad map in Rivals, and personally, I'm not that much of a hater of the moving elements of this map. You have the frozen airfield, which is the map that just shifts where the point is. I'm not sure exactly how it works, but it feels like usually about 20 seconds after you cap the first point, the whole map shifts closer to the spawn, basically making the disadvantage that you get for losing the first fight of the round. It basically diminishes a little bit of that advantage that you inherently get, which I think leads to less snowballs overall. You have the Eldritch Monument, which is the map that shifts vertically. If Airfield was the one that shifts horizontally, this one shifts vertically. The point goes up, the point goes down. Sometimes you can get closed off from the fight and you have to walk all the way around to get back into the action. And then you have the Super Soldier Factory, which is the third map, which has pillars that spawn up, that rise up and rise down, and parts shifting every which way. Personally, this is my least favorite point on this map, but overall, I'm not the biggest hater of the moving environments. I do think that this map has a lot of potential to grow on me over time, especially on Airfield and the Monument. You can very much get used to the map, and the more I play it, the more I feel comfortable with the environment moving, and I'm learning how to play on a map like that. I think a big reason why though I have it ranked as the worst map is just because in a game that's fairly new and everyone's trying to learn the heroes and how they interact with each other and how to win the game versus 6 enemies that also have their own complex kits. We're still in the learning phase of the game, and the moving environments can be a little too much. It can feel a little overwhelming, and they're not always easy to play on. The Super Soldier Factory one, there's so much chaos with everything shifting around. It's hard to just sit behind cover. There's no real cover on the map, so you just have to adapt to whatever's going on in the given moment, which again, over time, I do think this map has a lot of potential to grow on me. If I redo this video in a year's time, this map might be one of my favorite maps, or at least, further up. But right now, it's just the map that I look forward to the least whenever I Q ranked. At number 8, I have Wakanda Hall of Djala, the Convergence map. This is the map where I feel like the map elements are the most pointless and random. First point, if you shoot down any major structure, the map will basically get mad at you and start firing meteors on the point, which is kind of cool. I get the developers probably just had this idea of how cool would it be if the map was interactable in the way to where you have to avoid these obstacles while you're trying to fight the other team. I really really feel like it's absolutely pointless, and I would be perfectly happy if they got rid of it. People that are new to the hero shooter genre, I think, complain a lot about all the visual stimuli that goes on just from the heroes and the abilities themselves. I don't think there needs to be like this extra element where the map is just, you know, shooting missiles. Second point, if you shoot down a major structure, it'll enter anti-gravity mode, which again feels just kind of pointless. In all my time playing Rivals, I don't think I've had like a super fun, interesting interaction that was caused by this anti-grav. And third point, if you shoot a structure, this is when the smoke screen will come up. People can hide in it, pop out, and use their ults. I think this is the least offensive and probably actually the most interesting, because you could actually use the smoke to set up plays for your team. And I think there's counterplay. If we're attacking and I don't see their Doctor Strange on their front line, I'm like, he probably has his ultimate and he's probably sitting in that smoke getting ready to pop out at us. So I feel like there's a good amount of like counterplay there. I don't hate it, but is it really adding all that much on a game by game basis? I mean, probably not. So I'm really just not a fan of the gimmicks on this map. Layout wise, I think first point is the map where I get full held the most, and it's the map that I have the most full holds. Admittedly, I don't think that's necessarily a layout issue. I think it's a little bit of an understanding issue. As the attackers, you have so many options. You can go up the left side, around, cross the bridge, basically get behind them for free just by walking. You don't even have to use like movement abilities. And so if you know what you're doing, you can outposition the other team and kind of get them surrounded. If you do have to go to the right side, you can break down this wall and open up the choke for yourself a little bit more. It's just the worst of any option is to just go straight at the point from under the bridge. And for some reason, this is the option that it seems like everyone wants to take. And then you end up getting full held because your tanks are just getting outpositioned and you're trying to fight a losing battle. The end of second point, I think, is another like common bottleneck where it can be really hard versus a defense that knows what they're doing to get the payload up the stairs around the corner and to fully cap that second point. There's so many advantageous positions that the defenders can be playing on. Overall, again, I don't hate the map despite its placement. If this was a tier list, I'd put it like low B tier. Number 7, I have Yggdrasil Royal Palace, the second domination map on the list. For me, Yggdrasil has a really good point, kind of like a mid point, and it has a really bad point. The good point is the Bifrost Garden, which is probably my favorite domination point in the entire game. I think you can play just about any hero on this map. Like Dive is very good. There's a ton of things you can do on Spider-Man or Panther, but also like the brawlier heroes are also very good. Like the map is just solid. There's no, you know, super annoying gimmick. It's just always the point that I think I look forward to the most. The midpoint, I think, is Throne Room. The point kind of sits at the bottom of these like giant stairs. A lot of high ground you have to deal with. I feel like the walk from spawn is like very far on this map. The point that I dislike the most is Odin's Archive, which is just a big open room with the destructible high ground. And it just seems like every single wall on the map is so flimsy. There's not that much natural cover to take. When I think about the destructible environments being annoying in Rivals, my head goes to this map. I just imagine myself sitting on the high ground and I'm shooting at the enemy, and then boom, some wall builds in front of me and all of a sudden they're just safe. I also just feel like the team that has the point is at a big advantage because they can control your high ground and then they can fall back, drop down if they need. I feel like if you win the first fight of the round on this map, I feel like you're very favored to win the whole round, which can feel really not good if you're the losing team. The vibe of Yggdrasil is obviously very sick though. This is one of the coolest maps in the game. The throne room is an incredible concept for a map that you're just playing on this giant throne. It's obviously very cool. I like the whole palace vibe of the other two maps. At the end of the day, this list, when in doubt, the thing that I'm going off of is just how much I look forward to actually playing it. And for me, this map is going to come in at number 7. I think it's just like a solid B tier map.
Number 6, I have the newest map to Marvel Rivals. I have Midtown. Aesthetically, I really like the whole spooky New York vibe of the map. The map gimmick on Midtown doesn't really affect the gameplay at all. Basically, if you don't know, whenever you break something on Midtown, instead of it breaking down, it'll essentially build up, which does look pretty cool. At the end of the day, it's sort of a nothing gimmick. I prefer something that slightly changes the aesthetics of the map more than a gimmick that slightly changes the gameplay of the map. Like, this is fine. It's fine. Map layout wise, I think first point plays relatively standard for a rival's first point payload map. Second point is probably the biggest obstacle for the attackers to overcome. Pushing it down the hill around the corner can be very difficult. It can be hard to get the payload that last couple of feet. Even if you kill the defenders, they can spam down at you when they're walking back. And I think it's very common to get stuck at this point. But if you do manage to get it to third point, in my experience, you almost always full cap. I think the big reason for this is the defenders just spawn so far. It feels like a mile-long trek just to get back to the payload. So if the attackers get it to third point with any amount of time, I just feel like 9 times out of 10, all you have to do is win one more fight, and then you basically full cap. So that makes it so there's two main types of ways a round plays out on Midtown. Either the attackers get stuck at the end of second point, or they full cap all 3 points. I think the best layouts for these payload maps are one where the first point is easy, but not too easy. The second point is like a medium difficulty for the attackers, and then the third point is the hardest. I think that ramping up of difficulty makes for a good map. If the third point is too easy, then you end up with a lot of 3-3 games, and you end up in a lot of overtimes, which I think happens a lot on Midtown. And it's to the point where every time I load up Midtown, I'm like, well, here we go. Here's a 40-minute game, which definitely can be fun. A nice long game can be fun, but it's definitely not what I want every time. And those long OT games definitely are not everyone's cup of tea. Number 5, I have another convoy map. The first map I would put in the A tier, I do have Tokyo 2099 Spider Islands. And I have no major complaints with this map. It's just a good standard convoy map. I think it plays really well. First and second point, the defenders have several high ground options, while the attackers have several different pass and flanking options. Second point has that giant building in the middle that you can break down, which drastically changes how the map feels. And then third point, the map tightens up and becomes more brawly, like you would probably expect on a good third point on a payload map. The aesthetic is obviously very fun. I like the Japanese temple situation you have going on here. Overall, I'm happy when I queue into this map, but I just personally don't prefer it over the maps higher up on the list. I think from this point up, if you said any of these maps are your favorite map in the game, I think it would make a lot of sense. And number 4, this might be controversial. I do have Clintar, a convergence map. I believe the main reason most people don't like Clintar is the first point. Truly, I don't necessarily understand it. You have so many options as the attackers. You can take the right path and flank all the way around them in an instant, shoot the bridge to give yourself a path straight to the room behind them, and then as soon as you get control of the high ground behind the point and the health pack room right below that, you're in a really good spot to be able to cap that point. As long as you're actually flushing out both the high ground and the low ground there, you're in a really good spot. Sometimes I feel like people just try to run straight for the point with their head down, and that might be where people get into trouble, but I don't find myself getting full held all that often on this point. I feel like I view the Wakanda convergence map, but similar to how other people view Clintar, but I'm not sure. Second point, you either love it or you hate it. The defenders have a decent amount of high ground they could use. The elevators, the sideways jump pad, but the shootable elevator things are pretty accessible for the attackers as well. So you as the attacker can use them to try to get the defenders off the high ground. I just feel like this point plays pretty well. You have the gloop walls, which are awful when you're the one that gets walled off by them, but as long as you have awareness that the wall is there and you take note of that in your head, like, oh shit, they could shoot this wall behind me, you're gonna be fine. I think people just aren't used to playing with them yet. I found myself using the gloop walls to wall people off and get myself free kills, so I feel like I have a positive view of it because I tend to use it to my advantage. The one at the very end of second point is especially good when you're on the attacker side. You use it to wall somebody off right as they're coming through, essentially like a pseudo like May wall that you just put up behind them, which can lead to free kills. Or if you're about to cap the objective, you can just shoot it and it's going to stall the enemies out for maybe a second or two, which could be the difference if you cap or not. I just find myself using them a lot, you know, like I feel like it's a fun interactable element to the map that adds more than it subtracts. Third point can be very tricky for the attack. You have to push the payload very deep into the enemy spawn to be able to full capture, and the defenders have very easy access to those like rocky high grounds over on their right hand side, and so it can definitely be tricky to full cap on this map. But I'm of the belief that like the final little bit on third point should be difficult to capture for the attackers. You should be rewarded if you cruise through first and second points, and so you have a lot of time to eventually build your ultimates and full capture the point. I like that last little bit can be such a challenge, but you know, I was a fan of 2CP in Overwatch, so So, shows where my head's at. If you go into third point with only 2 minutes left on the clock, you're probably not going to be able to full cap. You're not going to be able to win the fights you need to win and build the ultimates that you need to build to be able to capture all the way, because the defenders don't spawn very far from the point. It's probably my hottest take of the whole list, but I do enjoy Clintar and I do look forward to it when it comes up. For me, it's at the top of A tier. The third best map in Marvel Rivals is going to be Wakanda Domination. Overall, I like the domination mode a lot more in Marvel Rivals than I did in Overwatch. In Overwatch, it was called Control, but it's basically the same thing. The only real difference, but I think it's a very smart change that they've made, is that your ultimate carries over from round to round in Domination. In Overwatch, your ult charge would reset back to 0 between rounds. A lot of times in this mode, the team that wins the first fight of the round is very favored to win the whole round, especially the first round of the game, because you win that first fight of the game, you have your ultimates for the second fight, then bam, you win the second fight with your ultimates. All of a sudden, you're sitting at like 60-70%, if not more. Then the other team might finally get their ults and they might be able to win a fight with that. But by the time you lose that one and you're on like the 4th, 5th fight of the game, the team that won the first fight of the round is going to have their ultimates back for a second time, and they're going to be able to close out the round with them. And so the way that the ultimate economy works, it makes it so that the team that wins the first fight of the round is just very likely to win the round. But because your ults carry over from one round to the next, I think that helps out the flow of the situation to where now, if you lose that first round, maybe the other team used a lot of ultimates to be able to finish that round off. You, as the team that lost, are going to have the advantage going into the next round because you're closer to your ultimates. Hopefully that makes sense, but I think it makes it so there's a lot less 2-0s in Rivals than there was in Overwatch. One team just doesn't dominate the whole game. I feel like every time I play Domination, it comes down to the final map. It's good, close games that can go either way. All of that to say, I like Domination. The reason why I don't have the other two Domination maps higher is because I think that they have some points that I'm not the biggest fan of, but I do believe Wakanda Dom has 3 solid points. The Chrono Vibranium Experiment Area, which is a mouthful. This map has some of the properties of some of the other points that I didn't love on the other Dom maps. The point itself is pretty wide open with cover that isn't always reliable, but the cover itself is tied to the destruction of the map, which means that it's a lot more predictable than, the RNG of the Super Soldier Factory map from Hydra Base. This point is kind of a 3-lane map where all 3 lanes are viable for the attackers, and each lane has multiple entrances to the adjacent lane, meaning that you have options on options on options as far as what path you want to go to get back to the point. You can go on little flanks for yourself to get yourself in an advantageous spot, to get an angle on the enemies, to get yourself a kill. Overall, I think it's just a well-designed layout for a point. Warrior Falls is one of the most unique looking and feeling points in the entire game. It's like in the cave system with the point being right over top of the falls, but the entire cave system collapses on itself if you break down too many of the walls, which drastically changes the layout of the map, but not in a bad way. You still have enough options as a team coming back, where right out of spawn, you can go straight up to the high ground, or you can walk through the tunnel and make a right and then go up that ramp that forms and get to the point that way. I still feel like you have options. It's just different options than before the cave system collapsed. And then Stellar Spaceport, I think, is just another good, unique feeling and looking map. And I feel like that's the main reason why I like Wakanda so much, is that all 3 of these points have their own unique flavor in not only how the point plays, but in how the points look. They all feel very different while still managing to all be an enjoyable experience, unlike Hell's Heaven. There is the same gimmicks from the other Wakanda map that I wasn't the biggest fan of, but I think I just enjoy this map outside of the gimmick enough to where I'm willing to put it number 3 on my list. The second best map in Marvel Rivals, in my opinion, is going to be the Tokyo 2099 Convergence map. I like First Point. There's multiple high grounds for the defenders to play on. If you're playing a melee character, you can play on the roofs and kind of fall down and collapse onto the enemy right as they're walking through the choke. There's multiple paths for the attackers to approach the point. They can go left around that side building, or you can go closer left and take the jump pad up to clear those people off that left high ground. There's just multiple ways to approach the point. If the defenders know what they're doing, they can really use that window on the back side of the point to kind of hunker down and stall out the objective while only controlling a small amount of space, which is one of the only things I don't necessarily like about this map, but it's not the end of the world. Second point, you push the payload through like some tight streets. Both teams can fight for that middle building, which having control of that middle building can be very important for both the attackers and the defenders. If you're able to have that and use it as the attackers, you can push it pretty much all the way through second point until the very end, where getting it those last couple inches under that bridge can be very difficult. It's a little bit like Midtown second point, but I think it's less bad because the attackers don't have to walk as far, because you could just shortcut through that middle building and get back to the point relatively quickly. But it definitely can be a difficult second point to capture. Third point, I think, is a very well-balanced third point. It feels difficult in a good way to cap all the way through third point, but it's not too difficult to where it feels like it's impossible. This map is just very well balanced all the way through. Aesthetically, I love the futuristic Tokyo city vibes, like juxtaposed with the older temple aesthetic that's similar to the other Tokyo map. It definitely feels like these Tokyo maps are inspired by Hanamura from Overwatch, especially this one. From the temples to the giant wall that kind of makes up the first choke point to the arcade machine room that the attackers spotted. I feel like you'd be crazy to not say that this is at least a little Hanamura inspired. Personally, I don't really have a problem with it. Hanamura was a beautiful map, and I think the Rivals spin on it did a really good job. And this is one of my favorite maps in the game, and one of the maps I look forward to the most whenever it comes up. About my number one overall favorite map at the top of S tier, I do have Yggdrasil Path. The main reason this map is number one is I love the way it feels when you play it. I think this is the perfect example of a map that kind of ramps up for the attackers as far as the difficulty goes. It gets much harder the further you go. First point tends to be easier for the attackers in my experience. By the time you get your first set of ultimates, you're usually able to use them to capture the whole point. Maybe outside of like a good defensive strange portal where they come back and they manage to stop you right as you're about to cap. That feels like that happens a lot. But other than that, I feel like it's relatively easy. Second point, I think, is a good like medium difficulty. You can definitely get stuck at the end of second point, but if you manage to wipe the defensive team, you can take that space and hold them back and make them filter through the chokes while you're putting pressure on them and doing damage to them as they're trying to get through those like small doors to get back to the second point. Third point, I think, is a very defensive sided point. This is where you can really make your stand as the defenders. As the defender, you can use the twists and turns of the map to really take team fights. There's 3 or 4 different good spots to try to fight as the defenders on this point. It reminds me a lot of like King's Row third point or Eichenwald third point from Overwatch, which are probably my 2 favorite maps in the whole game. The first 2 points are very open points. They're kind of attacker sided, but the third point is a very closed off, kind of choke heavy, defender sided point. It's almost like the entire flow of the map shifts from second point to third point. But not only does the gameplay shift, the entire map itself shifts to a nighttime setting as the attackers enter third point, which changes the aesthetic of the entire game. Overall, this map has some of my favorite vibes in Marvel Rivals. It looks beautiful. I didn't even mention the Loki ghost that sticks to you and whispers in your ear in the attacker spawn, which I think sets up the story for the map. Yggdrasil Path for me just kind of hits on every single front, and for me that's why I believe it is the best map in Marvel Rivals. So that's my list. I feel like there's a solid chance that I might have to make another one of these map ranking videos 6 months from now as I and everyone else learns more about these maps. This is just kind of a snapshot of where my head is at about 2 months after the game's release. Let me know if I'm wrong. Make your case in the comments. What's your favorite map in the game? Thank you guys for watching.